So when I first saw the news about Markieff Morris being signed by the OKC Thunder, I'll admit I didn't think too much of it, but as I've thought about it more and more, I think there's a chance that Markieff could actually be a positive for this OKC team, given that this team actually likes each other, whereas the Wizards did not. And when I look at some of Markieff's shooting numbers, not necessarily the percentages, but more so where he's taking his shots at 29 years old, I think he's starting to figure out the player that he really is, because I think one of the problems with Markieff throughout his career is that he's taken too many mid-range jumpers, he's posted up too much, he's tried to take pull-ups and go off the dribble, when he probably should have just attempted more threes, right? And this year, he's up to 4 threes a game. About 70% of his shots come from at the basket and from three. He's toned down on all the mid-range jumpers and all that. And now you put him in a situation where OKC likes each other, whereas the Wizards did not, and there's no controversy about anything really on this team, as the Paul George-Westbrook relationship is really good, and Steven Adams is an awesome team guy, Schroeder is bought in, this entire team is really bought in, then perhaps Markieff can step in here and actually be a good player. Now, that's me being optimistic. There is a chance that Markieff steps in here and he's a guy who just really isn't that good, where he's got the size to be a defender, but he's not smart enough and he doesn't care enough. There's a chance that even if you get him open threes all day, he just really can't make them in. He might be a guy who needs to have the ball in his hands because, again, he may still think he's just a better player than he actually is. I don't know, it could go either way, but with a guy like Markieff Morris, who at times has been, I would say, an above-average player, usually when Scott Brooks would kind of lay into him a bit, like that one year where the Wizards climbed out of their bad start, then perhaps it's in OKC. But it is going to require Morris to buy in, and I think for him to be at his best with this team, there is some life with him setting screens for Westbrook, because perhaps there's a chance that Markieff could get some post-ups on smaller guys, and perhaps Billy Donovan could even find some ways to use Markieff off the ball and as a cutter occasionally, because he is a big body who's decently athletic. I mean, I don't think he's going to overwhelm that many guys with his athleticism, but he can move around the floor well enough. He can finish most plays that you give him and all that. And he does still have some ball handling chops. I mean, definitely not a guy that you want having the ball more than Paul George, Westbrook, or Schroeder, but if it comes down to a possession where he's forced to make a play, he can occasionally do something. I mean, if Paul George gets screens from Morris and then they decide to trap PG, Morris can make a play in that type of situation, or he might be able to hit a wide open shot. So there is definitely life for some creativity with him, but I do think a lot of it is going to be, is he willing to stand in the corner and just make shots? And I think in that specific thing, he could actually be good, because I kind of look at Markieff as PJ Tucker, where throughout his career in Phoenix, PJ was not bad from three, occasionally below average, whatever. He comes to Houston, he's getting way more wide open shots than he's ever gotten. He's always in the corner, and suddenly he's become a pretty reliable outside shooter for Houston under those circumstances. I'm going to guess that Paul George, Westbrook, and Schroeder can create a solid amount of open looks for Markieff, and if he's standing in the corner, the easiest three-point shot, of course, then maybe he can actually be the shooter that OKC has needed, because I think that was their big downfall at the deadline, was they didn't get somebody who can reliably knock down shots, and perhaps Markieff can be that guy. Now again, there's a chance, number one, he does not buy into that because his self-awareness is not that good. It's possible that he's actually not that good of a shooter, where you can set him up as much as you want and they're still not going to go in. But I think given that throughout his career he's been able to get to like 36% from outside and high 70s, low 80s at the free throw line, perhaps he can make shots. Now, his frequency in those two areas is not that high. Like, the most threes he's taken in his career is actually this season, and it's only 4 a game. But perhaps on OKC, buying into everything, being willing to stand in the corner, and not starting, which I think could be good as well, because too much Markieff is probably a bad thing, then perhaps he could be a positive piece for OKC. I think he's probably going to, well, potentially, get into Patrick Patterson's minutes, because Patterson is, he hasn't been that good this season for OKC. Maybe he's still a capable defender, because he at least knows how to play defense, but he's way too hesitant with his shot. He has a tough time just making shots in general, which is pretty rough. He doesn't shoot anything besides threes pretty much at this point. Seems like he's gotten a little heavier throughout his career as well. And while I am a little fearful that Markieff and his lack of fear when it comes to shooting will lead to bad shots, it is also possible that it will lead to him being a little more reckless from 3 when it's a good shot, which is something that OKC has really needed, especially from a guy like Patterson, because between the Jeremy Grants and the Schroeders and the Fergusons and Patterson and Abdul Nadir as well, like, all these guys have good 3-point percentages, but they don't shoot that many a game. So the moment there's a closeout or whatever, they're passing it off to somebody. Maybe if Markieff really buys into what I think OKC is going to ask him to do, and I could be dead wrong about what they envision him being, but if that is the case, I don't know, could he end up shooting just a lot of 3-pointers? I think it's at least possible, and if all those things happen, then this could be a good pickup for them. Now, if we're going to talk about defense, first off, I think Markieff fits into the tough thing that OKC is going for, and they may be able to put out one of the biggest lineups that I can think of between Paul George, Markieff Morris, Jeremy Grant, Steven Adams, and then Westbrook. Now, I don't know if they're ever going to use that 5-man lineup, but that lineup could cause a lot of deflections and could be a pretty difficult one to deal with on the boards as well. A lot of switchability there. Westbrook has cared a little bit more on defense this season, and even if that one specific lineup is not out there, we expect that Markieff is going to be playing with a lot of these tall, multi-position guys with like PG and Grant, and if you want to put Terrence Ferguson into that conversation, I mean, he is 6'7", he's a light dude, but the guy does play hard, then I think that gives them a little bit more versatility defensively. Not that I think Markieff Morris is some awesome defensive player, but at his very best, he's at least been not bad to occasionally pretty decent. So if he can just be that for OKC, and I think a lot of that comes back to, will he buy into the offense? Because I do think Markieff is one of those guys where if he feels like he has a real place in the offense, then he's going to play harder on defense. So, yeah, it could go well. It could go well. I know Markieff Morris has spent most of his career being the most average to underwhelming player in the league, but perhaps there's a chance this could actually go well.